She looked me in the eyes and said we'd fix everything. I believed her. Of course I did. She's my daughter. But I should have known better. When the family meeting started, I thought it was to support me. Instead, they stared at me like I was some pathetic liar. She stood beside them, arms crossed, silent. Then she opened her mouth and shattered me. That's when I stopped hoping they'd ever see the truth on their own. Hi, I'm Helen, and this is my story. Wherever you're watching this from, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I was standing at the kitchen counter slicing tomatoes for dinner when Lauren walked in with that look on her face. You know the one. The expression that says she needs something, but doesn't want to ask directly. My daughter has perfected this particular dance over the years. "Mom, you're making that salad too early," she said, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a bottle of water. "The lettuce will wilt." "I've been making salads for 40 years, honey." I kept my voice light, the way I always do. "I think I know when to prepare them." She laughed, but not the warm kind. "Right, of course. You know everything about cooking." She twisted the cap off her water bottle with more force than necessary. "Speaking of which, Eric's coming for dinner tomorrow, and you know how he gets when there's not enough food." There it was. The request wrapped in criticism, delivered with just enough edge to make me feel foolish for even thinking about saying no. I set down my knife and turned to face her. How many people should I plan for? Just the usual family. Eric, Jenna, their kids. Noah, if he can make it. Maybe 10 people total. She took a long drink of water, watching me over the bottle. "You don't mind, do you? I mean, you're always saying how much you love cooking for everyone." The thing about being needed is that it feels good right up until the moment you realize you're not appreciated. You're just expected. But I nodded anyway because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. "Of course I don't mind. I'll go to the store in the morning." "Great. Oh, and Mom?" Lauren paused in the doorway, her voice taking on that particular tone she uses when she's about to say something that will sting. "Maybe try not to tell those long stories tomorrow. You know how Eric gets when you go on and on about the old days." My hand stilled on the cutting board. "What stories?" "You know what I mean. The ones where you make yourself sound like some kind of saint who sacrificed everything for us kids." She shrugged like it was nothing, like she was commenting on the weather. "It's just, we're all adults now, Mom. We don't need the guilt trips." The words hit me like cold water, but I managed to keep my expression neutral. "I don't tell guilt trip stories, Lauren." "Don't you?" She tilted her head, studying me with those sharp blue eyes that used to look at me with such love when she was small. "Last week you spent 20 minutes talking about how you gave up that nursing supervisor position to stay home with us. The week before that, it was the story about selling your grandmother's jewelry to pay for Eric's college tuition. Those things actually happened." My voice came out quieter than I intended. "I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying maybe we don't need to hear about them every time we get together." She softened her tone just enough to make it sound like concern instead of criticism. "It makes everyone uncomfortable, you know? Like you're keeping score of everything you've done for us." I turned back to the tomatoes, focusing on making each slice perfectly even. "I'm not keeping score." "Good, because if you were, you'd realize that we keep you comfortable here. You have a roof over your head, food on the table, family around you all the time. A lot of women your age aren't so lucky." She came up behind me and squeezed my shoulder, the gesture feeling more like a warning than affection. "You should be grateful we want you here with us." The knife slipped, and I nicked my finger. A small drop of blood fell onto the cutting board, mixing with the tomato juice. I reached for a paper towel, wrapping it around the cut, while Lauren continued talking as if nothing had happened. Anyway, I should go pick up Sophie from practice. Thanks for handling dinner tomorrow, Mom. You're the best. She kissed my cheek, quickly, and was gone, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my bleeding finger and the weight of her words. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the half-prepared salad, thinking about what she'd said, the stories I tell. Are they really guilt trips? Or are they just the truth of my life, the things I did because I loved them? When did sharing my memories become something that made people uncomfortable? Michael wandered into the kitchen and, hour later, his reading glasses perched on his nose and a book tucked under his arm. "Smells good in here," he said, though I hadn't started cooking anything yet. "Lauren said we're having everyone over tomorrow." "That's right." I finished bandaging my finger and started cleaning up the tomato mess. 10 people for dinner. He nodded absently, already opening his book. "That's nice. Family dinners are important." He settled into his chair at the kitchen table, the same chair he'd claimed as his own 20 years ago when we first moved into this house. "Need any help?" We both knew he didn't mean it. Michael has perfected the art of offering help in a way that makes it clear he hopes you'll say no. "I've got it handled," I said, because that's what he wanted to hear. Good, good. He was already absorbed in his book, the conversation forgotten. I went upstairs to my bedroom. Our bedroom, technically, though Michael spends most nights in his recliner downstairs, and sat on the edge of the bed. On the nightstand was a photo from Lauren's college graduation. She's wearing her cap and gown, beaming at the camera, and I'm standing beside her with my arm around her waist. The pride on my face is unmistakable. I remember that day so clearly. I remember thinking that all the sacrifices had been worth it, that my beautiful, brilliant daughter was going to take on the world. In the photo, she's looking at me with such love, such gratitude. When did that change? When did I become the embarrassing old woman who tells too many stories and needs to be reminded to be grateful? I picked up the photo and studied it more, closely. There's something in Lauren's eyes that I didn't notice before. Or maybe I just didn't want to see it. Even then, even in that moment of triumph, there was a distance there. A calculation, like she was already planning her escape from everything I represented. The phone rang downstairs and I heard Michael answer it. His voice was muffled, but I caught enough to know it was Eric calling about tomorrow's dinner. "Yes, she's making plenty of food," Michael said. "You know your mother. She always goes overboard." "Goes overboard? Is that what they call it? When I make sure there's enough for everyone? When I cook their favorite dishes? When I spend my Social Security check on groceries so no one leaves hungry?" I set the photo back on the nightstand and lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The house felt different somehow, like the walls were closing in. Or maybe I was just finally noticing what had been true for a long time, that I'd become invisible in my own home. A convenient fixture that everyone expected to work, but no one really saw. Tomorrow I'd get up early and go to the store. I'd buy the expensive steaks Eric likes and the organic vegetables Jenna insists on for the kids. I'd spend the day cooking and cleaning, setting the table with the good china, making sure everything was perfect. And when they all gathered around, that table they'd eat and laugh and talk over me like I wasn't there. But tonight, lying in the dark with my bandaged finger throbbing, I allowed myself to wonder, what would happen if I just stopped? What would happen if I didn't get up early, didn't go to the store, didn't spend my day making sure everyone else was comfortable and fed? The thought was both terrifying and thrilling, but I pushed it away because that's not who I am. I'm the one who takes care of everyone else. I'm the invisible backbone that holds this family together, even when they can't see me anymore, even when they don't want to. The grocery store was crowded for a Wednesday morning, but I didn't mind. I actually preferred the chaos to the quiet of the house. At least here, when people bumped into me or cut in front of me in line, it wasn't personal. It was just life. I was studying my list. Steaks, potatoes, green beans, ingredients for Lauren's favorite chocolate cake, when I heard someone call my name. Helen Carter. I turned to see a woman about my age with silver hair and a warm smile. It took me a moment to place her, but then it clicked. Claire Matthews. My goodness, how long has it been? Too long. She abandoned her cart and came over to hug me, the kind of genuine embrace I hadn't felt in months. You look wonderful. How are you? I'm fine. Just fine. The automatic response came easily, but Claire's eyes were too knowing, too familiar with my patterns from our old friendship. Are you really? She studied my face with the intensity of someone who'd known me before I learned to hide behind pleasant smiles. Because you look tired, honey. We'd been close once, Claire and I. Our kids had played together. We'd shared coffee and complaints about husbands and dreams about the future. But life had pulled us in different directions when her family moved. Across town, and somehow we'd let the friendship fade into Christmas cards and occasional grocery store encounters. Just busy with family, I said, gesturing to my overflowing cart. Having everyone over for dinner tonight. Everyone? She raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a lot of work. I don't mind. I love cooking for them. The words felt hollow, even as I said them, and from the look on Claire's face, she heard it too. Do you have time for coffee? There's that little place next door. She glanced at her watch. I was just picking up a few things, nothing that can't wait. I almost said no. I had shopping to finish, prep work to do, a cake to bake, but something in her voice, some echo of the friendship we used to have, made me nod. I'd like that. 20 minutes later, we were sitting across from each other in a corner booth at Maggie's Cafe, steam rising from our coffee cups. Claire had aged well. There were lines around her eyes, but they were laugh lines mostly. She looked content, settled in a way that I envied. So tell me about this family dinner, she said, adding cream to her coffee. Who's coming? Lauren and her daughter, Sophie, Eric and Jenna and their kids. Maybe Noah if he can get off work. I stirred my coffee absently. Just the usual crowd. And they're all coming to your house? Well, it's Lauren's house now. Technically. Michael and I moved in with her after his heart attack last year. I tried to make it sound casual, like it had been a mutual decision instead of the gradual erosion of independence that it really was. Claire nodded slowly. That must be an adjustment. It's fine. It's good to be around family. I took a sip of coffee, grateful for something to do with my hands. Lauren says it's better this way, that she can keep an eye on us. Keep an eye on you? Claire's tone was carefully neutral, but I caught the edge in it. What does that mean exactly? I found myself telling her things I hadn't said out loud to anyone. About the small comments, the way conversations stopped when I entered a room, the feeling that I was being tolerated rather than welcomed. About Lauren's words yesterday, the suggestion that I should be grateful for their charity. Yesterday she told me I tell too many stories, I said, surprised by how much it still hurt to say it. She said I make everyone uncomfortable when I talk about the things I did for them growing up. Claire was quiet for a long moment, turning her coffee cup in slow circles on the table. What kinds of things? You remember, The nursing supervisor position I turned down when Eric was having trouble in school. Selling my grandmother's ring to help pay for Lauren's wedding. Taking that second job when Noah needed braces. I shrugged. Normal parent things. Helen. Claire leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Those weren't normal parent things. Those were extraordinary sacrifices. All parents make sacrifices. Not like that. Not to that extent. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Do you remember when we used to talk about traveling? You had that whole trip to Italy planned out. You'd saved for 2 years. I did remember. I'd had brochures, a travel agent, even a passport application filled out. That was just a dream. No, it wasn't. You had the money saved, the time off approved from the hospital. And then Eric's first business failed, and you gave him the travel money to keep his house from being foreclosed on. The memory came flooding back, sharp and painful. Eric standing in my kitchen, tears in his eyes, as he explained how bad things had gotten. The way he'd looked at me with such hope when I'd said I could help. He paid me back eventually. Did he? Claire's voice was skeptical. Because I remember you mentioning that you never did make it to Italy. She was right, of course. Eric had made a few payments. Then the payments had gotten smaller and less frequent until they stopped altogether. When I gently reminded him about the debt, he'd gotten defensive, saying he thought I'd given him the money as a gift, that he hadn't realized I expected it back. It's just money, I said, but the words felt weak. It's not just money, Helen. It's your dreams. It's your life. Claire squeezed my hand. And from what you're telling me, it sounds like they've forgotten that you had a life before them, and that you still deserve to have one now. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling between us. Around us, the cafe buzzed with normal conversation, people making plans, sharing gossip, living their lives without constantly calculating how much of themselves they could afford to give away. I love them, I said finally. They're my children. I know you do. But love isn't supposed to make you invisible. Claire's eyes were sad but determined. You always did give too much, even when we were younger. Remember when you volunteered for every PTA committee, every bake sale, every fundraiser? You were always the first to say yes when someone needed help. There's nothing wrong with helping people. No, there isn't. But there's something wrong when helping people means erasing yourself. She paused, choosing her words carefully. When was the last time someone in your family asked what you wanted, what you needed? I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it again. I couldn't remember. Conversations in my house were about logistics. Who needed what, when, where. They were about Lauren's work stress, Eric's business problems, Noah's dating life. When had anyone last asked about my dreams, my fears, my hopes for the future? I should go, I said, suddenly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I still have shopping to finish, and there's so much to do before tonight. Claire nodded but didn't move to leave. Helen, can I ask you something? What would happen if you didn't cook dinner tonight? What would happen if you just didn't? The question was so foreign, so impossible that I almost laughed. I can't do that. Everyone's expecting you to take care of them, the way you always have. But what if you took care of yourself for once? She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Here, let me give you my number. I want you to call me if you need to talk, okay? About anything. We exchanged numbers, and I promised to stay in touch, though we both knew how these things usually went. But as I walked back to the grocery store, Claire's words echoed in my head. What would happen if you just didn't? I finished my shopping on autopilot, loading my cart with everything on my list and more. At the checkout, the total made me wince. Nearly $200 on my Social Security budget. But Eric liked the expensive steaks, and Jenna would notice if I skimped on the organic produce for the kids. Driving home, I thought about Italy, about the travel brochures I'd kept in my desk drawer for months after I'd given Eric the money. I'd thrown them away eventually, telling myself it was silly to hold on to dreams that would never happen. But now I wondered, what if I'd said no? What if I'd told Eric I was sorry, but the money was for something important to me? Would he have found another way? Would his house have been foreclosed on, or would he have figured out a solution that didn't require me to sacrifice my dreams? I'd never know, because I'd never given him the chance to try. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my arms full of grocery bags, I'd pushed the uncomfortable thoughts away. Tonight was about family, about bringing everyone together around the table. That was worth something, wasn't it? That was important too. But as I struggled to carry all the bags in one trip, and no one came out to help, despite the fact that Lauren's car was in the driveway, I couldn't shake Claire's question. What would happen if you just didn't? Maybe someday I'd be brave enough to find out. The dining room was perfect. I'd spent 3 hours getting it just right. The good china, the cloth napkins I'd ironed twice, the centerpiece of flowers from the garden that I'd arranged and rearranged until it looked effortless. The steaks were resting, the potatoes were golden, and the chocolate cake sat cooling on the counter like a small monument to maternal devotion. Everyone had arrived within minutes of each other, the way families do when there's food involved. Eric came through the door talking loudly about his latest business venture. Jenna trailing behind him with their 2 kids while checking her phone. Noah showed up just as I was putting the final touches on the table, and Lauren emerged from upstairs where she'd been getting ready, looking beautiful and composed as always. "Mom, this looks amazing," she said, surveying the dining room with what looked like genuine appreciation. "You really outdid yourself." The compliment warmed me more than it should have, but I basked in it anyway. I just wanted everything to be nice for everyone. "Well, it's perfect." She squeezed my shoulder, and for a moment I felt like I mattered again. We were halfway through dinner when it happened. Eric was telling a story about his college roommate, someone I'd met several times during parents' weekends, when he got a detail wrong. Remember that guy, Mom? The one who was always borrowing money and never paying it back? What was his name? Steve something? Actually, honey, his name was David. David Morrison. I said it gently, not wanting to embarrass him. And he was the one who helped you with your calculus homework, remember? He was quite responsible, actually. Eric paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. "No, I'm pretty sure it was Steve, and he definitely owed me money." I remember David quite well because I met his parents several times. Lovely people from Ohio. His father was a dentist. I smiled, remembering. "David was the one who drove you home that time when you had the flu freshman year. He called me from the road to make sure I knew you were coming, and that you might need to see a doctor." The table had gone quiet, everyone looking between Eric and me like they were watching a tennis match. Eric's face was flushed, whether from wine or embarrassment, I couldn't tell. "Mom, I think you're mixing him up with someone else," he said, his voice taking on an edge. "I know my own college roommate." "Of course you do, sweetheart. I'm just saying his name was David, not Steve. I have the pictures from Parents' Weekend, if you'd like to see them." I kept my tone light, conversational. "I labeled all of them, so I'm quite sure." That's when Lauren laughed. It wasn't a big laugh, just a small chuckle, accompanied by a shake of her head. But something about the sound of it made my blood run cold. It was the laugh of someone who found me amusing in the worst possible way. "Oh, Mom," she said, still smiling, but with something sharp in her eyes. "You remember it wrong. You always do." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face flush hot, then cold. "I don't remember it wrong. I have an excellent memory." "Do you?" Lauren's voice was gentle, almost pitying, which somehow made it worse. "Because you've been doing this a lot lately, correcting people about things that happened 20 years ago, insisting your version is right when everyone else remembers it differently." "I'm not correcting people, You're just making everyone uncomfortable." Eric jumped in, and I realized with growing horror that this wasn't spontaneous. They'd talked about this, planned this. It's like you think you're the only one who was there, the only one who remembers anything accurately. "That's not what I think." My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "I just have a good memory for details." "Mom, honey." Lauren's voice took on that particular tone she used when she was explaining something to Sophie. Patient but condescending. "Memory isn't as reliable as we think it is, especially as we get older. It's completely normal for details to get fuzzy or for us to remember things the way we wish they had happened instead of the way they actually did." The implication hung in the air like smoke. She wasn't just saying I was wrong. She was suggesting I was losing my mind, that my age had made me unreliable, delusional even. "I am not losing my memory," I said, my voice stronger now. "David Morrison was Eric's roommate. He was from Ohio. His father was a dentist, and he helped Eric with calculus. These are facts, not fuzzy memories." The family exchanged glances, the kind of looks that pass between people when they think someone is having an episode. Jenna cleared her throat uncomfortably. Noah stared at his plate. Michael, my own husband, said nothing. "Okay, Mom," Lauren said in that same patient tone. "If you say so." But her expression said something entirely different. Her expression said, "Look at this poor old woman, insisting she knows better than everyone else. Look how sad it is when..." They start to go. The conversation moved on, but I sat frozen in my chair, my appetite gone. Around me, my family laughed and talked as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just collectively decided that my memory, my version-ness of events, my very perception of reality was unreliable. Later, after everyone had eaten my cake and complimented my cooking and gone home, I sat alone in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. Lauren came in as I was scraping plates, her expression softer now, more concerned. "Mom, are you okay? You seemed upset during dinner." I kept my eyes on the plates, afraid that if I looked at her, I'd start crying. "I'm fine." "Are you sure? Because if you're feeling confused about things, or if your memory is giving you trouble, we should probably talk to Dr. Peterson about it." There it was. The suggestion that I needed medical intervention because I dared to remember something differently than Eric did. Because I'd had the audacity to correct a simple factual error. "My memory is fine, Lauren. I know you think it is. But sometimes people don't realize when they're having problems. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It happens to lots of people as they age." She moved closer, her voice taking on that false gentleness again. "We just want to make sure you're okay." I turned to face her then, this daughter I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, and I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach drop. It wasn't concern. It wasn't love. It was calculation. She was building a case, gathering evidence for some future argument about my competence, my reliability, My right to have an opinion about my own life. "I'm going to bed," I said, abandoning the dishes. "Mom, wait. Let's talk about this." But I couldn't. I couldn't stand there and let her dissect my sanity like a lab specimen. I couldn't listen to her explain, in that patient, pitying voice, why my memories were wrong and theirs were right. I went upstairs and closed the bedroom door behind me, then sat on the edge of the bed with my hands shaking. On the nightstand, that photo from Lauren's graduation seemed to mock me now. The love in my eyes looked foolish, naive. The pride on my face looked like the expression of someone who didn't know she was raising her own executioner. I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out a small photo album I kept there. Pictures from Eric's college years. I flipped through it until I found what I was looking for. A photo from Parents' Weekend, sophomore year. Eric with his arm around a tall, lanky boy with dark hair and glasses. On the back, in my careful handwriting, Eric and David Morrison, October 1985. I stared at the photo for a long time, this piece of evidence that proved my memory wasn't faulty, that I wasn't the confused old woman they'd made me out to be. But what was the point of being right if no one believed you? What was the point of having a good memory if your own family had decided it was unreliable? I put the photo back in the album, and the album back in the drawer. Tomorrow Lauren would probably ask me how I was feeling, whether I'd thought more about seeing Dr. Peterson. She'd speak to me in that gentle, concerned voice that made me feel like I was already halfway to a nursing home. But tonight, alone in my room with the evidence of my sanity hidden in a drawer, I allowed myself to feel something I'd been pushing down for months. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, calculating kind that builds slowly and burns for a long time. They wanted to make me doubt myself, to question my own mind. They wanted me confused and uncertain, easier to manage and dismiss, but I wasn't confused and I wasn't losing my memory. I was just finally starting to see clearly. 3 days after the dinner disaster, I was in the garden pulling weeds when Lauren found me. I'd been avoiding the house, spending my mornings outside where the air felt cleaner and the roses didn't judge my memory. My hands were dirty and my back ached, but the physical discomfort was preferable to the emotional minefield inside. "Mom, can we talk?" I looked up to find her standing at the edge of the garden bed, wearing that expression I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant she had something important to say and expected me to drop everything to listen. "I'm almost finished here." I turned back to the stubborn dandelion I'd been wrestling with, hoping she'd take the hint and leave me alone. But Lauren had never been good at taking hints. She came closer, her expensive shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. "This is important, Mom. It's about the other night." Of course it was. I'd been waiting for this conversation, dreading it but knowing it was inevitable. "What about it?" "You seemed really upset when we corrected you about Eric's roommate." Her voice was gentle, the way people talk to children or psychiatric patients. "I'm worried about you." I sat back on my heels, wiping my dirty hands on my gardening gloves. I wasn't upset about being corrected. I was upset about being wrong. "But Mom, that's just it. You weren't wrong on purpose. Memory issues are completely normal at your age. There's no shame in it." She crouched down beside me, bringing herself to my eye level, like she was talking to Sophie. "I've been doing some research, and there are medications now, treatments that can help slow the progression. Progression. As if my supposed memory loss was a terminal illness moving through its stages. "Lauren, I don't have memory issues. Eric's roommate was named David Morrison, not Steve. I have pictures to prove it." She sighed, the sound heavy with patience and pity. Mom, even if you have pictures, that doesn't mean your interpretation of them is accurate. Sometimes our minds fill in details that aren't really there, especially when we want to be right about something. The condescension in her voice was so thick I could practically taste it. This was my daughter, the child I'd stayed up with through fevers and nightmares, the girl I'd driven to soccer practice and piano lessons and college interviews. And she was talking to me like I was a confused stranger who'd wandered into her garden. "I want to show you something," I said, standing up and brushing dirt off my knees. "Come inside." She followed me upstairs to my bedroom, her silence somehow more ominous than her words had been. I pulled out the photo album and flipped to the picture of Eric and David, holding it out to her with hands that were steadier than I felt. Lauren took the photo and studied it, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought I'd won. The evidence was right there in black and white, my careful handwriting on the back proving that my memory was intact, that I wasn't the failing old woman she'd made me out to be. Then she looked up at me with something that might have been sympathy if it hadn't felt so much like pity. "Mom, this photo doesn't prove anything except that you wrote David Morrison on the back. But you could have written the wrong name, or you could have written the right name but been thinking of a different person." She handed the photo back to me gently, like she was returning a broken toy to a child. "This is exactly what I mean about memory issues. You're so convinced you're right that you're seeing evidence where there isn't any." The photo felt heavy, in my hands, this piece of my past that she'd just dismissed as unreliable. "You're saying I don't know what I wrote on my own photograph. I'm saying that photographs can't tell us everything, and our memories of why we wrote something or what we were thinking at the time can be faulty." She sat down on the edge of my bed, her voice taking on that therapeutic tone again. "Mom, I love you so much, and that's why I'm concerned. These little mix-ups are happening more and more often." "What mix-ups?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "Last week you insisted that my high school graduation was in June, when it was actually in May. 2 weeks ago you corrected Noah about which college he went to, even though he obviously knows where he got his degree." She counted them off on her fingers like evidence in a court case. "And now this thing with Eric's roommate. It's a pattern, Mom." I stared at her, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, and felt something cold settle in my chest. "My memory is fine, Lauren." "I know you believe that, but believing something doesn't make it true." She reached out and took my hand, her touch gentle but somehow threatening. "I think we need to have a family meeting. Everyone's worried about you, and we need to figure out how to help." A family meeting. The word sent a chill through me, bringing back memories of childhood interventions and serious conversations that changed everything. "What kind of family meeting?" "Just the family. We'll sit down together and talk about our concerns. Maybe come up with a plan for getting you the support you need." She squeezed my hand, her smile bright and false. "It'll be good, Mom. We all love you so much, and we want to make sure you're safe and happy." Safe and happy. Code words for controlled and compliant. I pulled my hand away from hers, suddenly needing distance. "When?" "This weekend? Saturday afternoon? I'll call everyone and set it up." She stood, smoothing down her skirt like the conversation was already over, the decision already made. "Don't worry about anything, okay? We'll figure this out together." After she left, I sat alone in my bedroom holding the photograph of Eric and David Morrison. The boy in the picture had kind eyes and a shy smile, and I remembered how relieved I'd been when Eric had found such a good friend. David had been the steady one, the responsible one who'd kept Eric grounded during those chaotic college years. But according to my family, David didn't exist. Or if he did, I was too confused to remember him accurately. My own memories had been declared unreliable, my perceptions dismissed as the confused ramblings of an aging mind. I put the photo away and went downstairs where Lauren was already on the phone in the kitchen. "Yes, Saturday at 2, she was saying. "I know it's short notice, but this is important. Mom's been having some issues, and we need to discuss them as a family." A pause, then. "No, nothing dangerous. Just memory problems. Confusion about past events. But it's getting worse, and we can't ignore it anymore." She saw me in the doorway and gave me a bright smile, covering the phone with her hand. "Just coordinating with everyone for Saturday," she whispered. "Eric and Noah are both free." I nodded and walked past her into the living room, where Michael was watching television with the volume turned up too loud. He glanced at me when I sat down but didn't say anything. He'd perfected the art of being present without being involved, of witnessing without participating. "Did Lauren tell you about the family meeting?" I asked. He muted the television and turned to look at me, his expression carefully neutral. "She mentioned it. She's worried about you, Helen. We all are." "Are you?" I studied his face, looking for some sign of the man I'd married 40 years ago. "Are you worried about me? Or are you worried about the inconvenience of having a wife with memory problems?" He flinched like I'd slapped him. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? When was the last time you defended me, Michael? When was the last time you took my side in anything?" The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. "I don't take sides. I try to stay neutral." "Neutrality is a luxury I can't afford right now." I stood up, suddenly tired of looking at his passive face. "Your daughter is building a case against my sanity, and your silence is helping her do it." I left him sitting there and went back to the garden, where the weeds were honest about being weeds and the roses didn't pretend to love me while plotting my downfall. Saturday was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare for a family tribunal where my own children would sit in judgment of my mind, my memory, my right to be treated as a competent adult. 3 days to figure out how to defend myself against people who'd already decided I was guilty. But as I knelt in the dirt pulling dandelions, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was angry. And anger, I was beginning to understand, might be exactly what I needed. The night before the family meeting, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to Michael's steady breathing and staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through decades of memories that my children had declared unreliable. Every conversation, every sacrifice, every moment of love and support that had brought us to this point where they could sit in judgment of my sanity. At 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to the kitchen. I made coffee and sat at the table with a yellow legal pad, the kind I used to use when I was working as a nurse and needed to document everything carefully. If my family wanted evidence, I'd give them evidence. I started with the obvious things. The money. Not because I wanted to throw it in their faces, but because money leaves a trail, and trails can be verified. I went to the filing cabinet in the corner where I kept our financial records and started pulling out bank statements, canceled checks, receipts I'd saved over the years. The numbers were staggering, even to me. I'd never added it all up before, never sat down and calculated the total cost of being a mother who couldn't say no. Eric's first business loan when the bank turned him down. $15,000 from our retirement savings. His second business loan 2 years later. Another $10,000. The down payment on his house when his credit wasn't good enough. $25,000. That was supposed to be our vacation fund. College tuition for all 3 kids. $180,000 total, including graduate. School for Lauren and Noah. Then there were the smaller things that added up over time. Car repairs, insurance payments, groceries when money was tight, birthday parties for grandchildren, Christmas gifts that I bought and wrapped and delivered, while their parents took credit, medical bills when Eric broke his leg and didn't have insurance, Jenna's dental work when she was between jobs. By dawn, I had filled 6 pages with careful calculations, dates, and amounts. The total was over $300,000. Money I'd given freely. Gladly, because that's what mothers do. Money that had never been repaid, rarely even acknowledged, and certainly never appreciated. But it wasn't just about money. I started another list. The intangible things. The sacrifices that couldn't be measured in dollars but had cost me just as much. The nursing supervisor position I turned down when Eric was struggling in high school. The promotion that would have meant travel, prestige, and a significant salary increase, but also less availability for family crises. I'd stayed in my staff nurse position for 10 more years, watching younger nurses advance past me because I'd chosen family over career. The trip to Italy that became Eric's business bailout, the cruise Michael and I had planned for our 25th anniversary, that became Lauren's wedding fund when she decided she needed a bigger ceremony than she could afford. The small house we'd looked at in Florida, our dream retirement home that we'd never bought because there was always someone who needed our money more. The hobbies I'd given up because there wasn't time or money for both my interests and their needs. The friendships I'd let fade because I was always available for family emergencies. The volunteer work I'd loved at the hospital that I'd quit when the grandchildren were born, and I became the default babysitter. As the sun came up, I sat back and looked at what I'd written. It was a ledger of a life spent in service to others, a careful accounting of everything I'd given up so they could have more. And somehow, despite all of this documented evidence of my devotion, my children had decided that I was the problem. Lauren found me there an hour later, still in my robe with papers spread across the kitchen table. "Mom? What are you doing up so early?" She looked at the legal pads and bank statements with concern. "What is all this?" "Research," I said, simply. "You wanted to talk about patterns and evidence. I thought I should be prepared." She picked up one of the pages and scanned it, her expression shifting from concern to something that looked almost like fear. "Mom, what is this list?" "It's a record of the money I've given to this family over the years. Loans, gifts, payments made on behalf of various family members." I kept my voice calm, professional. I thought it might be relevant to our discussion today. Why would this be relevant? But her voice had lost some of its confidence, and she set the paper down quickly like it might burn her. "Because you've been questioning my memory, my ability to recall events accurately. I thought you might want to see some concrete evidence of my mental faculties." I pulled another sheet toward me. "This is a list of career opportunities I passed up to be available for family needs. This one documents the volunteer work and hobbies I gave up. And this one tracks the various times I provided childcare, transportation, and other support services." Lauren was quiet for a long moment, staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "Mom, why are you doing this?" "Because apparently my word isn't good enough anymore. My memories are unreliable, my perceptions are faulty, and my version of events can't be trusted." I met her eyes steadily. "So I thought I'd provide some documentation that might be harder to dismiss. This isn't what today is about." She sounded flustered, off balance in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager caught in a lie. Isn't it? You've called a family meeting to discuss my mental competence. You've suggested I need medical intervention because I remember things differently than Eric does. You've made it clear that you think my age has made me unreliable. I gestured to the papers. I'm simply providing evidence to the contrary. We're worried about you, Mom. This obsessive list-making, this need to prove yourself. It's not normal behavior. There it was again. The suggestion that anything I did to defend myself was further evidence of my instability. Stand up for yourself? That's not normal. Provide documentation? That's obsessive. Remember things accurately? That's confusion. What would be normal behavior, Lauren? Sitting quietly while my family decides I'm losing my mind? Accepting your diagnosis without question. I started gathering the papers, stacking them neatly. I'm 62 years old, not 92. My mind is sharp, my memory is intact, and I have decades of evidence to prove it. She sat down across the hall from me, her expression shifting to that therapeutic concern again. Mom, I need you to listen to me. This defensiveness, this need to justify yourself, it's concerning. When people start feeling like they have to prove their competence, it's often because deep down they know something is wrong. The logic was so circular, it was almost beautiful. Defend yourself, and that's proof you're unstable. Don't defend. Yourself and your silence is consent to their judgment. Either way, I lost. I'll see you at 2:00, I said, standing up with my papers. I'll be interested to hear what the family has decided about my future. I left her sitting in the kitchen and went upstairs to shower and dress. In the mirror, I looked older than I felt, tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. But my eyes were clear, and my hands were steady as I put on my best dress. Navy blue with small white flowers, the one I'd worn to Lauren's college graduation. If this was going to be a trial, I was going to dress for it. The family arrived promptly at 2, filing into the living room with the solemnity of mourners at a funeral. Eric sat in Michael's usual chair, his expression serious and slightly uncomfortable. Noah took the couch, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Jenna stayed in the kitchen, claiming she needed to watch the kids, but I could hear her moving around, clearly listening. Lauren took charge, as I'd known she would. Thank you all for coming. I know this is difficult, but we need to talk about Mom's recent behavior and figure out how to help her. What behavior? Noah asked, glancing at me with confusion. She seems fine, to me. That's part of the problem, Eric jumped in. She seems fine on the surface, but there are signs. Memory issues, confusion about past events, argumentative behavior when she's corrected. I sat quietly in my chair, the yellow legal pads in my lap, watching my children discuss me like I wasn't there. This was how it started, I realized. This was how people lost their autonomy, their dignity, their right to be heard. First, you were talked about instead of talked to, then you were managed instead of respected, then you were invisible. I think we should let Mom speak for herself, Noah said, and I felt a flicker of hope. Mom, how are you feeling? Are you having any problems with your memory? Finally, a direct question. I looked around the room at these people I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, and I made a decision. I'm feeling like my family has decided I'm incompetent without asking for my input, I said calmly. I'm feeling like my memories and perceptions have been dismissed as unreliable without any real evidence, and I'm feeling like this meeting is less about helping me and more about managing me. The room went quiet. Lauren's expression tightened, and Eric shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mom, that's not—" Lauren started, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. You've all expressed concern about my memory, so I thought you might be interested in some concrete evidence of my mental acuity." I opened the first legal pad and began to read. On March 15th, 2018, I wrote a check for $15,000 to Eric Carter for business expenses. On July 26th, 2019, I wrote another check for $10,000, also for business expenses. On September 5th, 2020, I transferred $25,000 from our savings account to help with Eric's house down payment. Eric's face went pale. "Mom, what are you doing?" "I'm providing documentation of my memory, since that seems to be in question." I continued reading, my voice steady and clear. Lauren's wedding expenses, paid by me, $18,000. Noah's graduate school tuition, $35,000. Various car repairs, insurance payments, medical bills, and other expenses paid on behalf of family members over the past 10 years. Approximately $85,000. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear Jenna in the kitchen, no longer pretending to be busy, clearly listening to every word. The total comes to just over $300,000 in direct financial support, not including the countless hours of childcare, the career opportunities I passed up to be available for family needs, or the personal sacrifices I made to ensure everyone else's comfort and security. I closed the legal pad and looked around the room. Now, does this sound like the behavior of someone with memory problems? Someone who's confused about past events? Or does it sound like someone who remembers exactly what she's given, and to whom? The room remained silent. Eric was staring. At his hands, Noah was looking at me with something like amazement, and Lauren's face had gone through several shades of red. "This is exactly what I was talking about," Lauren said finally, her voice tight with control. This obsessive need to keep score, to throw our past in our faces. This isn't normal behavior, Mom. What would be normal, Lauren? Forgetting that I've spent my entire adult life supporting this family. Pretending that my sacrifices don't matter because acknowledging them makes you uncomfortable? I leaned forward, my voice still calm but carrying an edge now. Or maybe normal would be sitting quietly while you declare me incompetent so you can make decisions about my life without my input. "That's not what we're doing," Eric said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? You've called a meeting to discuss my mental state without asking me how I feel about my mental state. You've decided my memories are unreliable based on one disagreement about a name. You've suggested I need medical intervention because I have the audacity to remember my own life accurately." I stood up, the legal pads in my hand. "If this isn't about controlling me, then what is it about?" Noah cleared his throat. "Maybe we should take a step back here. Mom, are you feeling okay? Are you happy?" It was such a simple question, but it hit me like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had asked if I was happy? When was the last time anyone had cared about my emotional well-being instead of just my usefulness? "No," I said quietly. "I'm not happy. I haven't been happy for a long time. But apparently, admitting that is also a sign of mental instability." The meeting dissolved into uncomfortable murmurs and awkward glances. Eric left first, claiming he had somewhere else to be. Noah lingered, looking like he wanted to say something but not knowing what. Lauren stayed behind, her expression unreadable. "We're not done with this conversation, Mom," she said after the others had gone. "Yes, we are." I walked to the front door and held it open. "Unless you have legal grounds to declare me incompetent, which you don't, then my mental state is my business, not yours." She left without another word, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. This wasn't over. If anything, I just made things worse for myself. But as I stood in my empty living room, surrounded by the evidence of a life spent in service to others, I realized something important. I didn't care anymore. I was tired of being managed, tired of being dismissed, tired of being grateful for scraps of affection from people who should have loved me unconditionally. For the first time in years, I felt something that might have been freedom. I was sitting in the garden the next morning, still in my robe with my coffee growing cold, when Claire appeared at the side gate. She looked concerned and slightly out of breath, like she'd hurried over. "Helen, I hope you don't mind me dropping by unannounced. I tried calling, but you didn't answer. I turned off my phone after Lauren's third attempt to reach me since yesterday's meeting. I wasn't ready to hear her voice yet. Wasn't prepared for whatever new strategy she'd developed overnight to manage my concerning behavior. I don't mind at all. Come sit." I gestured to the small wrought iron chair beside me. "How did you know to find me out here?" "I saw you from the street. You looked, She paused, studying my face with those knowing eyes. "You looked like someone who'd been through something difficult." I almost laughed, but it would have come out bitter. "That's one way to put it." Claire settled into the chair and waited, not pushing for details, but making it clear she was available to listen. It was a skill she'd always had, this ability to create space for other people's pain without trying to fix it immediately. "My family had an intervention yesterday," I said finally. "They're concerned about my mental state." "Your mental state?" Claire's eyebrows shot up. "Helen, you're one of the sharpest people I know. What on earth are they talking about?" So I told her. About the dinner, about Lauren's laugh, about the family meeting where they'd discussed my competence like I was a problem to be solved. I told her about the lists I'd made, the documentation I'd gathered, the way they'd turned my self-defense into further evidence of instability. "They think I'm losing my memory because I corrected Eric about his college roommate's name. They think I'm obsessive because I documented the money I've given them over the years. They think I'm argumentative because I won't accept their version of reality without question." Claire was quiet for a long moment, her expression growing darker as I talked. When I finished, she was silent for so long I wondered if she was reconsidering our friendship, wondering if maybe they were right about me after all. "Helen," she said finally, her voice carefully controlled. "Do you remember why Tom and I moved across town 15 years ago?" The change of subject caught me off guard. "Your job transfer, wasn't it? Tom got that promotion with the engineering firm." "That's what we told people. The truth was, we moved because Tom's mother was driving us insane." She shook her head, a rueful smile on her face. "She'd moved in with us after her husband died, and within 6 months she was running our household, criticizing everything I did, undermining my authority with the kids. Sound familiar?" I nodded, seeing the parallel she was drawing. The final straw came when she started telling people I was neglecting the children because I worked outside the home. She'd make little comments to neighbors, to other family members, about how she had to step in because I wasn't capable of managing my own household. Claire's voice hardened. She was building a case against my competence as a mother and wife, just like your daughter is building a case against your competence as a functioning adult. The comparison hit me like a cold splash of water. But this is different. Lauren is my daughter, not my mother-in-law. She's supposed to what? Love you unconditionally, respect your autonomy, treat you like an intelligent adult capable of making her own decisions? Claire leaned forward, her voice intense. Helen, love doesn't give people the right to control you. Family doesn't give them the right to dismiss your perceptions and gaslight you into doubting your own mind. Gaslight. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I'd heard the term before, but never applied it to my own situation. But that's what it was, wasn't it? The systematic undermining of my reality, the suggestion that my memories were faulty, that my perceptions were unreliable, that my responses to their treatment were symptoms of mental decline. But what if they're right? The question slipped out before I could stop it, the fear I'd been carrying for weeks finally given voice. What if I am losing my memory, becoming difficult, making things up? Claire reached over and took my hands, her grip firm and warm. Helen, you just recited 30 years of financial transactions from memory. You corrected a factual error about someone you met decades ago and turned out to be right. You documented your concerns with the precision of the trained nurse you are. Does any of that sound like someone with memory problems? When she put it that way, it sounded ridiculous. But the doubt was still there, planted by people who were supposed to love me, watered by their concerned voices and pitying looks. They made me feel crazy, I whispered, like I couldn't trust my own mind. That's the point. When someone wants to control you, the first thing they do is make you doubt yourself. They convince you that your perceptions are wrong, your memories are faulty, your reactions are inappropriate. Once you start questioning your own sanity, you stop fighting their control. I thought about Lauren's patient voice explaining why my memories couldn't be trusted, Eric's dismissive attitude when I'd corrected him, the way they'd all looked at me during the family meeting like I was a confused old woman having an episode. But why? Why would they want to control me? Claire was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. I think that's a question only you can answer. But I suspect it has something to do with guilt. You've given them so much over the years, sacrificed so much for their benefit. Maybe it's easier to paint you as a confused old woman keeping score than to acknowledge the debt they owe you. The truth of it settled over me like a heavy blanket. All those years of putting their needs first, of giving freely without keeping track, of being the invisible backbone that held everything together. And now that I was finally asking to be seen, to be heard, to be treated with basic respect, I was the problem. What do I do? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. You remember who you are, Claire said firmly. You're Helen Carter. You're a retired nurse who spent 40 years taking care of people. You raised 3 children, largely on your own, while your husband buried himself in work and books. You've given over $300,000 to support your family's dreams and needs. You're intelligent, competent, and deserving of respect. She stood up and brushed off her pants. And you're also my friend, which means you're not alone in this. I want you to have my spare key. She pulled a key from her purse and pressed it into my hand. If things get bad here, if they escalate their campaign to make you doubt yourself, you come to my house. Day or night, you come. The key felt warm in my palm, solid and real in a way that nothing else had felt lately. Claire, I can't just... You can. You absolutely can. You're not a prisoner here, Helen, even though they're trying to make you feel like one. She squeezed my shoulder. Promise me you'll use it if you need to. I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. After she left, I sat in the garden for a long time, turning the key over in my hands. It was such a small thing, but it represented something huge. The possibility of escape, of choice, of a life beyond the suffocating control of people who claimed to love me. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I didn't feel completely alone. That evening, Lauren came by with dinner from my favorite Chinese restaurant. She was all smiles and concern, acting like yesterday's confrontation had never happened. "I thought you might be tired after everything yesterday," she said, unpacking containers of sweet and sour chicken and fried rice. "I wanted to do something nice for you." I watched her bustle around the kitchen, setting out plates and napkins, chattering about her day at work. It was a performance, I realized. The loving daughter caring for her aging mother, making sure I was fed and comfortable, and properly grateful for her attention. "This is very thoughtful," I said, because that's what she expected to hear. "I also made an appointment for you with Dr. Peterson," she said casually, not meeting my eyes. "Just for a checkup. It's been a while since you've seen him, and I thought it would be good to make sure everything's okay." There it was, the next move in her campaign to establish my incompetence. A visit to the doctor who would ask leading questions about my memory, my mood, my ability to function independently. A visit that would create a medical record of concerns that could be used later to justify whatever decisions they wanted to make about my life. "When is this appointment?" I asked. "Thursday at 10. I'll drive you, of course. Make sure you don't forget anything important." She smiled brightly, but I could see the calculation behind it. I nodded and ate my Chinese food and played the role of the grateful mother who appreciated her daughter's concern. But inside, I was making plans of my own. Thursday was 3 days away. 3 days to decide how much of my autonomy I was willing to surrender for the sake of family peace. As I got ready for bed that night, I put Claire's key in my jewelry box next to my grandmother's ring, the one I'd sold years ago to help pay for Lauren's wedding. Except I hadn't sold it. I'd told them I had, but I'd actually hidden it away, some instinct telling me to keep one thing that was purely mine. Looking at the key and the ring together, I realized I'd been preparing for this moment longer than I'd known. Part of me had always understood that someday I might need to choose between being loved and being free. I was finally ready to make that choice. The house was quiet when I woke up Tuesday morning. Michael had left early for his weekly breakfast with his old work friends, and Lauren was already at her office. I had the place to myself for the first time in months, and the silence felt like a gift. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, trying to decide how to spend this rare solitude. That's when I noticed Lauren's laptop bag sitting by the back door, forgotten in her rush to get to work. She'd been working from home more often lately, claiming she wanted to keep an eye on me, and she usually took the laptop with her everywhere. I stared at the bag for a long moment, wrestling with myself. Looking through someone else's computer was a violation of privacy, the kind of thing I'd raised my children never to do. But then I remembered the way she'd looked at me during the family meeting, the cold calculation in her eyes when she'd suggested I needed medical intervention. If she was building a case against my competence, didn't I have a right to know what evidence she was gathering? I opened the bag and pulled out the laptop, my heart pounding like I was committing a crime. It took me a few tries to guess her. Password: Sophie's birthday followed by her graduation year, but eventually the desktop appeared. I felt a moment of triumph that was immediately followed by guilt. This was my daughter's private computer, and I was violating her trust. But then I opened her email and saw the subject line that made my blood run cold. Mom's situation. Need advice. The email was to her cousin Sarah, Michael's sister's daughter who lived in California. Sarah was a social worker, and Lauren had clearly reached out to her for professional guidance about how to handle an aging parent with cognitive issues. I read the email with growing horror. Sarah, I hope you're doing well. I'm writing because I need some advice about Mom. She's been showing signs of memory problems and confusion lately, and I'm worried about her living independently. She gets defensive when we try to help, insists her memory's fine when it clearly isn't. And yesterday she became obsessive about proving herself by listing every dollar she's ever spent on the family. It was really concerning behavior. I've made a doctor's appointment for her, but I'm worried she'll try to manipulate the situation or refuse to be honest about her symptoms. Do you have any advice on how to approach this? I love her so much, but I'm scared she's gonna hurt herself or someone else if we don't intervene soon. Also, I wanted to ask about the process for getting someone declared incompetent if it comes to that. I hope it won't, but I want to be prepared. What kind of documentation would we need? How long does the process take? Thanks for any guidance you can offer. This is breaking my heart, but I have to think about what's best for Mum's safety. Love, Lauren. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. She wasn't just questioning my competence. She was actively researching how to have me declared legally incompetent. She was consulting with a social worker about building a case against me, asking for advice on how to manipulate a doctor's visit to get the outcome she wanted. And the way she'd described the family meeting, as if my documentation of financial support was obsessive behavior, rather than a reasonable response to having my memory questioned. She'd twisted everything to fit her narrative of a confused old woman who needed to be managed for her own good. I scrolled down to read Sarah's response. Lauren, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Dealing with an aging parent's cognitive decline is one of the hardest things a family can face. From what you've described, it does sound like your mom is showing classic signs of early dementia. The defensiveness, the confusion about past events, the inability to recognize her own limitations. Here's my advice. Document everything. Keep a journal of incidents where she shows confusion or poor judgment. If possible, get other family members to witness and corroborate these incidents. The more evidence you have of her declining capacity, the stronger your case will be if you need to pursue guardianship. For the doctor's visit, don't let her go alone. Make sure you're there to provide context and examples of concerning behavior. Doctors often don't see the full picture during a brief appointment, so your input will be crucial. As for legal incompetence, the process varies by state, but generally you'll need medical evidence of cognitive impairment and documentation that she can't manage her own affairs. The fact that she's living with you already helps establish that she needs supervision. If you can show that she's making poor financial decisions or putting herself at risk, that strengthens the case. I know this is painful, but you're doing the right thing. Sometimes we have to make hard decisions to protect the people we love, even when they don't understand or appreciate it. Hang in there. Call me if you need to talk. Love, Sarah. I closed the laptop and sat in the silent kitchen, my hands shaking with rage and betrayal. They had it all planned out. The doctor's visit designed to create a medical record of incompetence, the documentation of my concerning behavior, the legal process to strip me of my autonomy and decision-making power. And they were doing it all under the guise of love and concern, convincing themselves that they were protecting me, even as they systematically destroyed my independence. I thought about all the times Lauren had hugged me lately, all the gentle words and patient explanations. It had all been performance, manipulation, designed to make me compliant while she built her case behind my back. The daughter I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for was treating me like an enemy to be defeated rather than a person to be respected. But as I sat there processing the betrayal, I realized something else. I now had evidence of their real intentions. Lauren thought she was being clever, consulting with professionals and documenting my behavior. But she'd left a trail of her own. And unlike her vague concerns about my memory, this was concrete proof of conspiracy and manipulation. I spent the next hour going through the rest of her emails, looking for anything else related to her campaign against me. What I found was even more damning. There were emails to Eric discussing my episodes and my inability to accept help. There were messages to a lawyer asking about guardianship procedures. There was even a draft email to Dr. Peterson's office, never sent, explaining her concerns about my mental state and asking him to pay special attention to signs of cognitive decline during my appointment. I printed everything and put the copies in a folder, then returned the laptop to its bag exactly as I'd found it. Lauren would never know I'd discovered her plan, which gave me a crucial advantage. While she was building a case against me, I could build a case against her. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. I spent the rest of the morning researching guardianship laws, reading about the process of having someone declared incompetent, learning about the rights I could lose, and the freedoms that could be stripped away. It was terrifying. Once someone was declared incompetent, they lost the right to make decisions about their own medical care, finances, and living situation. They became legal children, dependent on their guardian for everything from where they lived to what they ate. And the process, once started, was difficult to reverse. Lauren wasn't just trying to control me. She was trying to erase me as a legal adult. She wanted to turn me into a ward of the state, with herself as my keeper, making all my decisions and managing all my affairs while I sat quietly and gratefully accepted whatever scraps of autonomy she chose to allow me. The phone rang around noon, interrupting my research. It was Lauren calling from work. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling today?" Her voice was warm and concerned, the perfect performance of a loving daughter checking on her aging mother. "I'm fine, honey. Just having a quiet morning." "That's good. I was thinking we should go shopping this afternoon for some new clothes for your doctor's appointment on Thursday. I want you to look your best for Dr. Peterson." Look my best, as if my appearance would somehow convince him I was competent. Or maybe she wanted me to look frail and confused to support her narrative. Either way, it was another attempt to control and manipulate the situation. "That's very thoughtful, but I have clothes that are perfectly appropriate for a doctor's visit." "I know you do, but it's been a while since you've bought anything new. Consider it a little treat." Her voice took on that coaxing tone she used when she was trying to get her way without seeming pushy. "We could have lunch afterward. Maybe stop by that bookstore you used to love." Used to love. As if my interests were all in the past, as if I was already too far gone to enjoy the things that had once brought me pleasure. "Actually, I have plans this afternoon," I said, surprising myself with the lie. "Oh. What kind of plans?" I could hear the sharpness in her voice, the concern that I might be doing something without her knowledge or approval. "I'm having coffee with Claire Matthews. We're catching up on old times." There was a pause, and I could practically hear her calculating whether this was something she needed to worry about. "That's nice, Mom. Just be careful what you say to her, okay? Sometimes when we're feeling confused or upset, we might share things that aren't entirely accurate and that can worry people unnecessarily." There it was again, the suggestion that I couldn't be trusted to have normal social interactions, that my perceptions were so unreliable I might accidentally spread false information about my own life. "I'll be careful," I said, though we both knew I was lying. After I hung up, I called Claire and asked if she was free for coffee. I had things to tell her, evidence to share and plans to make. Lauren thought she was the only one who could play chess. But she was about to learn that her mother still had a few moves left. The game was far from over. I met Claire at the same cafe where we'd talked before. But this time, I came armed with a manila folder full of printed emails and a clarity of purpose that felt almost intoxicating. For weeks, I'd been reacting to my family's manipulations, defending myself against their accusations, trying to prove my competence to people who'd already decided I was incompetent. But now I was done being defensive. Now I was going on the offensive. Claire took one look at my face and ordered us both double espressos. "You look different," she said, settling into our corner booth. "Stronger somehow." I found out what they're really planning. I slid the folder across the table to her. Lauren left her laptop at home this morning. I probably shouldn't have looked, but I'm glad I did. Claire opened the folder and began reading, her expression growing darker with each page. When she finished, she sat back in her chair and let out a low whistle. "Jesus, Helen, this is systematic. They're not just worried about you. They're actively trying to have you declared incompetent. And they're doing it all while telling themselves they love me, that they're protecting me." I took a sip of my espresso, savoring the bitter strength of it. Lauren actually wrote that this is breaking her heart while she's researching how to strip me of my legal rights. "This is elder abuse," Claire said flatly. "What they're doing, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the conspiracy to have you declared incompetent without cause, it's textbook emotional and financial elder abuse." The words hit me like a physical blow. Elder abuse. I'd heard the term before, read articles about it, even encountered cases of it during my nursing career, but I'd never imagined it could happen to me, and certainly not at the hands of my own children. "But they're not hitting me or stealing from me," I said weakly. "They don't have to. Emotional abuse is just as damaging, and what they're planning is a form of financial abuse, taking control of your assets and decisions under the guise of protecting you." Claire leaned forward, her voice intense. "Helen, if they succeed in having you declared incompetent, they'll control everything. Your money, your medical decisions, where you live, who you see. You'll become a legal child with them as your parents." The reality of it settled over me like a cold fog. All those years I'd spent building a life, earning money, making decisions, being an independent adult, and my own children wanted to take it all away because I'd had the audacity to disagree with them about a college roommate's name. "What can I do?" I asked. "Fight back. You have evidence of their conspiracy, documentation of your own competence, and witnesses to their manipulative behavior." Claire tapped the folder with one finger. "But you need to be smart about it. They're expecting you to be defensive and emotional. Instead, you need to be strategic." We spent the next hour planning. Claire suggested I consult with an elder law attorney, someone who specialized in protecting seniors from exactly this kind of family manipulation. She also recommended that I start documenting everything: conversations, incidents, attempts at control or manipulation. "Most importantly," she said, "you need to establish your independence. Stop letting them make decisions for you. Stop accepting their help with things you can manage yourself. The more autonomous you appear, the harder it will be for them to claim you need supervision." I thought about the doctor's appointment Lauren had made for me, the shopping trip she'd suggested, the way she'd warned me to be careful what I said to Claire. Every interaction was designed to establish her control and my dependence. "I'm going to cancel the doctor's appointment," I said suddenly. Claire nodded approvingly. "Good. If you want to see Dr. Peterson, Make your own appointment. Don't let her be the intermediary in your medical care. We parted with a plan and a timeline. I would consult with an attorney within the week, start documenting everything immediately, and begin asserting my independence in small but visible ways. It felt good to have a strategy, to be taking action instead of just reacting. But as I drove home, I realized that the hardest part wasn't going to be fighting Lauren's legal machinations. It was going to be living with the knowledge of her betrayal, while pretending I didn't know what she was planning. I was about to become an actress in my own life, performing the role of the oblivious mother, while my daughter performed the role of the concerned caregiver. And somewhere in that performance, we'd both lost sight of the fact that we were supposed to love each other. Lauren was waiting for me when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a concerned expression. "How was your coffee with Claire?" "It was nice. We talked about old times, caught up on each other's lives." I kept my voice casual, friendly. "She's doing well. Her husband retired last year and they're thinking about traveling." "That sounds lovely." Lauren's smile was warm, but her eyes were watchful. Did you talk about anything else? About how you've been feeling lately?" There it was, the fishing expedition, the attempt to find out if I'd shared any concerning information with an outsider who might interfere with her plans. Not really. Just normal friend conversation. I poured myself a glass of water, using the activity to avoid meeting her eyes. "Why do you ask?" "No reason. I just want to make sure you're not worrying people unnecessarily. You know how things can sound worse than they are when you're talking to someone who doesn't have the full picture." The full picture. As if I was incapable of presenting an accurate account of my own life. As if my perspective was so skewed that I couldn't be trusted to have normal social interactions. "Claire didn't seem worried about anything," I said truthfully. Lauren relaxed slightly. "Good. I'm glad you had a nice time." She stood up and rinsed her teacup in the sink. "Oh, I called Dr. Peterson's office and confirmed your appointment for Thursday, 10 o'clock sharp. I'll pick you up at 9:30 so we're not rushed." The casual way she said it, as if it was already decided, as if my presence at an appointment I hadn't requested was just a given. It made my skin crawl. But I nodded and smiled because I wasn't ready to show my hand yet. "Actually, I was thinking I might drive myself," I said. "I haven't been getting out much lately, and the independence would be good for me." Lauren's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. You've seemed a little scattered lately, and I'd hate for you to get confused about the time or the location." Scattered, confused. More evidence for her case. More reasons why I needed supervision and couldn't be trusted to manage basic tasks like driving to a doctor's appointment. "I've been driving to Dr. Peterson's office for 15 years, I said mildly. "I think I can manage it." "I know you think you can, but—" She caught herself, probably realizing how condescending she sounded. "I just want to be there to make sure you don't forget to mention anything important. Sometimes patients don't give doctors the full picture of what's been going on." The full picture again. My picture, apparently, was incomplete, unreliable, not to be trusted. Only Lauren's version of events could provide the context necessary for proper medical care. "That's very thoughtful, but I'm perfectly capable of talking to my own doctor." I kept my voice pleasant but firm. "I'll drive myself." For a moment, I saw something flash in her eyes. Frustration, maybe even anger. But then the concerned daughter mask slipped back into place. "Of course, Mom. Whatever makes you comfortable." She paused at the kitchen doorway. "Just promise me you'll be honest with Dr. Peterson about how you've been feeling. About the memory issues, the confusion we've been noticing. It's important that he has all the information. Memory issues, confusion. She was still building her case. Still. Planting seeds for the narrative she wanted Dr. Peterson to hear. But now I knew what she was doing, and I could counter it. "I'll be completely honest with him," I said. And I meant it. I would tell Dr. Peterson exactly what had been happening. The gaslighting, the manipulation, the conspiracy to have me declared incompetent. I would give him the full picture. Just not the one Lauren was expecting. After she left for work the next morning, I called Dr. Peterson's office and canceled the appointment. Then I called back and made a new one for the following week, at a time when Lauren would be at work and couldn't help by providing her version of my mental state. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt enormous. For the first time in months, I'd made a medical decision without consulting my family, without asking permission, without accepting their help. I was reclaiming my autonomy one small step at a time. But I knew Lauren wouldn't see it that way. When she found out I'd canceled the appointment she'd made, she'd probably view it as more evidence of my declining judgment, my inability to accept necessary medical care. In her mind, every act of independence was a symptom of incompetence. The phone rang around noon. It was the doctor's office calling to confirm the cancellation. But it wasn't the receptionist I'd spoken to earlier, it was someone else. Someone who sounded confused. "Mrs. Carter? I'm calling about your appointment on Thursday. Your daughter called this morning to confirm. But when I checked the schedule, I saw that you'd called yesterday to cancel. I wanted to make sure there wasn't some confusion." My blood ran cold. Lauren had called to confirm an appointment that no longer existed. She'd been checking up on me, making sure I hadn't done exactly what I had done. "There's no confusion," I said carefully. "I canceled the appointment and rescheduled for next week." "Oh, I see. Should I call your daughter back to let her know about the change?" "No, thank you. I'll handle that myself." But I knew I wouldn't handle it. At least not right away. I wanted to see what Lauren would do when she showed up Thursday morning to drive me to an appointment that didn't exist. I wanted to watch her reaction when she realized I'd acted independently, made decisions about my own medical care, without her input or approval. It would probably be the final proof she needed that I was incompetent, that I couldn't be trusted to manage my own affairs. But it would also be proof of something else, that I was still capable of making my own choices, even when those choices weren't the ones my family wanted me to make. The game was getting more complicated, but I was finally learning the rules, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like I might actually have a chance of winning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to Michael's steady breathing and thinking about everything that had happened, everything I'd learned, everything I was about to lose. The weight of Lauren's betrayal pressed down on me like a physical thing, making it hard to breathe. At 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went downstairs to the kitchen. I made tea and sat at the table with a pad of paper, intending to make more lists, to document more evidence, to build my case against the people who were building a case against me. Instead, I found myself writing something entirely different. "Dear Mama, I know you've been gone for 8 years now, but I need to talk to someone, and you're the only person who ever really understood me. I'm in trouble, Mama, and I don't know what to do. Lauren wants to have me declared incompetent, my own daughter. The baby I nursed through colic and walked the floors with when she had nightmares, is consulting with lawyers about how to take away my legal rights. She thinks I'm losing my mind because I corrected Eric about something that happened 20 years ago. She thinks I'm obsessive because I documented all the money I've given this family over the years. Do you remember what you told me when I was pregnant with Lauren? You said that having children was like giving your heart permission to walk around outside your body for the rest of your life. You said it was the most beautiful and terrifying thing in the world, loving someone that much. You were right about the beautiful part. I loved them so much, Mama. I gave them everything I had and more. I turned down promotions to be available when they needed me. I sold your mother's jewelry to pay for their education. I gave up my dreams of traveling, of having a career that mattered, of being someone other than just Mom. But you were wrong about one thing. It's not terrifying to love them that much. What's terrifying is realizing that they don't love you back the same way. What's terrifying is discovering that the children you sacrificed everything for see you as a burden, an inconvenience, a problem to be managed. I keep thinking about that last conversation we had when you were in the hospital and knew you were dying. You told me you were proud of the mother I'd become, that you could see how much my children loved me. You said I'd done a good job raising them, that they'd take care of me when I got old, the way I'd taken care of you. But they're not taking care of me, Mama. They're trying to erase me. They want to turn me into a legal child, dependent on their permission for everything from medical care to where I live. And they're doing it all while telling themselves they love me, that they're protecting me. I feel so alone. Michael just sits in his chair and lets it happen, like he's already decided I'm not worth defending. Eric acts like I'm an embarrassment, someone who needs to be managed and contained, that tries to stay neutral. But his silence feels like abandonment. And Lauren is the worst because she does it all with such kindness, such concern. She's destroying me with love. I used to think I was a good mother. I thought I'd raised children who would respect me, who would value my opinions and treat me like an intelligent adult even when I got old. I thought the sacrifices I made would mean something, that the love I gave would be returned. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe I gave them too much, made life too easy for them, never taught them that love is supposed to be reciprocal. Maybe by always putting their needs first, I taught them that my needs don't matter. Maybe by always being available, I taught them that I don't have a life of my own worth respecting. I'm scared, Mama, not of getting or sick or dying. I'm scared of becoming invisible, of losing myself so completely that I forget who I used to be. I'm scared of spending my last years being grateful for scraps of affection from people who should love me unconditionally. But I'm also angry, and I think that anger might be the only thing that can save me. I'm angry that they think they can rewrite my history, dismiss my memories, and control my future. I'm angry that they've turned my love into a weapon against me. I'm angry that I have to fight my own children for the right to remain myself. I don't know what's going to happen next. I have a lawyer's number in my purse and evidence of their conspiracy in my filing cabinet. I have a friend who believes in me and a key to her house if I need to escape. I have options I didn't have a week ago. But I also have a broken heart and a family that's determined to destroy me for my own good. And I don't know if love can survive that kind of betrayal, even the fierce, protective love of a mother for her children. I miss you, Mama. I miss having someone who thought I was worth defending, someone who saw me as more than just the sum of my usefulness to others. I miss being someone's daughter, instead of just someone's mother. I hope wherever you are, you can't see what's happening. I hope you still think I did a good job raising them. I hope you're proud of the woman I'm trying to become, even if it's too late for me to be the mother I thought I was. Love always. Your Helen. I folded the letter and put it in my robe pocket, then sat in the quiet kitchen crying for everything I'd lost and everything I was about to lose. It felt good to write it all down, to put words to the grief and betrayal I'd been carrying. But it also felt dangerous, like admitting the truth might make it more real than I was ready to handle. I was washing my face at the kitchen sink when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Sophie appeared in the doorway, her hair messy from sleep and her eyes concerned. "Grandma? Are you okay?" I heard crying. My heart clenched. Sophie was 13, old enough to sense the tension in the house, but too young to understand the complexities of what was happening. She still looked at me with uncomplicated love, still saw me as Grandma instead of as a problem to be solved. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just couldn't sleep." I dried my face with a dish towel, trying to compose myself. "What are you doing up so late?" "I had a bad dream." She came closer, studying my face with the intensity that reminded me so much of Lauren at that age. "Grandma, are you sick?" The question caught me off guard. "No, honey. I'm not sick. Why would you ask that?" "Mom's been talking to people about you, on the phone, when she thinks I'm not listening. She sounds worried." Sophie sat down at the table, her legs swinging from the chair. "She said something about doctors and making sure you're safe." My chest tightened. Even Sophie could sense what was happening, could pick up on the undercurrents of control and manipulation that Lauren thought she was hiding so well. "Sometimes adults worry about things that aren't really problems," I said carefully. "Your mom loves me very much, and sometimes that makes her worry more than she needs to." Sophie nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Are you going to have to go away?" The innocence of the question, the fear behind it, nearly broke me. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Some kids at school, their grandparents had to go live in special places when they got old. Places where nurses take care of them all the time." Her voice got smaller. "I don't want you to go away." I sat down beside her and took her hands, these small hands that still reached for me when she was scared or sad, that still trusted me to make things better. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I felt completely certain about something. "I'm going to stay right here and I'm going to keep being your grandma for as long as you want me to be." She hugged me then, fierce and tight, and I held her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the sweetness of childhood that still clung to her, despite her growing awareness of adult complexities. "Grandma? She whispered against my shoulder. "Yes?" "I think you remember things just fine. You always remember my favorite cookies and which stories I like and what happened when I was little." She pulled back to look at me. "I don't think you're confused about anything." The validation from this child, this pure and honest assessment of my competence, meant more to me than all the documentation I'd gathered, all the evidence I'd compiled. Sophie saw me clearly without the filter of guilt or manipulation or hidden agendas. To her, I was still just Grandma, still the same person I'd always been. "Thank you for saying that, sweetheart. It means more than you know." After I tucked her back into bed, I went to my room and hid the letter in my jewelry box next to Claire's key and my grandmother's ring. 3 talismans of different kinds of love. The love I'd lost, the love I'd found, and the love that remained, pure and uncomplicated despite everything else that was falling apart. Tomorrow Lauren would discover that I'd canceled the doctor's appointment. Tomorrow the real battle would begin. But tonight, sitting in the dark with the memory of Sophie's hug still warming me, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. I felt like myself again. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that usually made me feel hopeful. But today, It felt ominous. I was dressed and drinking coffee when Lauren appeared in the kitchen at 9:15, car keys in hand, and that bright, determined smile on her face. "Ready to go, Mom? We don't want to be late for Dr. Peterson." I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring this moment when I still held all the cards. "Actually, honey, I canceled that appointment." The smile froze on her face. "You what?" "I canceled it. I wasn't feeling well Tuesday, so I called and rescheduled for next week." The lie came easily, smoothly. "I thought I mentioned it to you." "No, you didn't mention it." Her voice was carefully controlled, but I could see the frustration building behind her eyes. "Mom, you can't just cancel medical appointments without telling anyone. What if there had been an emergency? What if we needed to reach Dr. Peterson about something?" The logic was so twisted it was almost impressive. Somehow my decision to reschedule my own medical appointment had become a safety issue, evidence of poor judgment that put everyone at risk. "It's not an emergency appointment, Lauren. It's a routine checkup that I moved by 1 week." I set down my coffee cup and met her eyes. "I'm allowed to make decisions about my own medical care." "Of course you are. But when you're living with family, it's considerate to let people know about changes in your schedule." She was working hard to keep her voice gentle, but there was steel underneath it. "We worry about you, Mom. We want to make sure you're taking care of yourself." "I am taking care of myself. That's exactly what I'm doing." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see her recalculating, adjusting her strategy. This wasn't the confused old woman she'd expected to find, the one who would apologetically explain that she'd gotten mixed up about dates and times. This was someone who had made a deliberate decision and wasn't apologizing for it. "When did you reschedule for?" she asked finally. "Next Tuesday at 2. I stood up and rinsed my coffee cup in the sink, using the activity to avoid her searching gaze. "I can drive myself, so you don't need to worry about your schedule." "Mom," her voice took on that patient, therapeutic tone that I'd come to hate. "We need to talk about what's been happening lately. Your behavior has been concerning." There it was, the word she'd been building toward, the clinical term that would justify whatever came next. My behavior was concerning, which meant I was concerning, which meant I needed to be managed and controlled for everyone's safety and peace of mind. "What behavior?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "The defensiveness, the secrecy, making medical decisions without consulting anyone, canceling appointments and not telling family members who are trying to help you." She counted, them off on her fingers like symptoms of a disease. "Yesterday you spent hours away from the house without telling anyone where you were going. Last week you became obsessive about documenting every dollar you've ever spent on this family. And now this." I turned to face her, this daughter I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who was now itemizing my crimes against her authority. "Lauren, I had coffee with a friend. I rescheduled a doctor's appointment. I documented financial information when my memory was questioned. These are normal adult behaviors." "Are they? Because to the rest of us, they look like signs that you're struggling to cope with everyday decisions and relationships." Her voice was getting sharper now, less patient. "Mom, we love you, but we can't help you if you won't admit there's a problem. The only problem is that you've decided I am incompetent, and you're trying to make that decision for me." The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. Lauren's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. "Mom, you're proving my point. This paranoid thinking, this idea that everyone is against you, It's not rational. Paranoid thinking. Another clinical term, another label to pathologize my resistance to their control. If I defended myself, I was defensive. If I made independent decisions, I was secretive and concerning. If I recognized their manipulation, I was paranoid. It was a perfect trap, designed to make any response I gave into further evidence of my incompetence. But I was done playing by their rules. "I know about the emails, Lauren." The words hung in the air between us like a bomb with the pin pulled out. Lauren went very still, her face cycling through confusion, realization, and something that might have been fear. "What emails?" "The ones to your cousin Sarah, asking for advice about having me declared incompetent. The ones to lawyers, researching guardianship procedures. The draft to Dr. Peterson's office, explaining your concerns about my mental state." I watched her face grow pale as I spoke. "I know what you're planning." For a moment, she looked like the little girl she'd once been, caught red-handed in a lie she couldn't talk her way out of. But then the adult Lauren reasserted herself, the one who'd learned to twist everything to her advantage. "Mom, if you went through my private emails, that's exactly the kind of behavior we're worried about. Violating privacy, acting secretively, becoming paranoid about normal family concerns." "Normal family concerns?" I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. "Lauren, you're consulting with professionals about how to strip me of my legal rights. You're building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent, based on the fact that I disagreed with Eric about a name. How is any of that normal?" "We're trying to protect you!" The words exploded out of her, all pretense of patience finally abandoned. "You're not thinking clearly. You're making poor decisions, and you're going to hurt yourself or someone else if we don't intervene." "What poor decisions? What dangerous behavior? Name one thing I've done that actually puts anyone at risk." She opened her mouth and closed it again. We both knew she couldn't answer that question, because there was no answer. I hadn't driven recklessly or left the stove on or wandered into traffic. I hadn't made any dangerous financial decisions or put myself in harm's way. My only crime was refusing to accept their version of reality without question. "The fact that you can't see it is part of the problem," she said finally, falling back on the circular logic that had trapped me for weeks. People with cognitive issues don't recognize their own limitations. I stared at my daughter, this stranger wearing a familiar face, and felt something inside me break. Not my heart. That had been breaking for weeks. Something deeper, more fundamental. The last thread of hope that we could find our way back to love and respect and mutual recognition of each other's humanity. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my kitchen. Get out of this house. I don't want to see you right now." My voice was steady, calm, but there was steel in it that surprised both of us. "I need time to think about what you've told me, what you're planning to do to me. Mom, you can't just—" "I can. This is still my house, too, and I have the right to ask you to leave." I moved toward the phone on the counter. "If you don't go voluntarily, I'll call the police and tell them my daughter is harassing me in my own home." For a moment, I thought she might refuse, might try to turn this into more evidence of my declining judgment. But something in my face must have convinced her that I meant it, because she picked up her purse and keys. "This isn't over, Mom. We're going to get you the help you need, whether you want it or not." After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, shaking with adrenaline and something that felt like victory. I'd finally stood up to her, finally refused to accept her narrative of my incompetence. But I knew she was right about one thing. This wasn't over. If anything, I just escalated the conflict to a new level. The phone rang an hour later. It was Noah, his voice careful and concerned. "Mom, Lauren called me. She's worried about you." "I'm sure she is." I kept my voice neutral, waiting to see which side he would choose. "She said you went through her private emails and then threw her out of the house. That doesn't sound like you." There it was, Lauren's version of events, carefully crafted to make me sound unstable and unreasonable. She'd left out the part about consulting lawyers to have me declared incompetent, the part about building a case against my sanity. In her version, I was just a paranoid old woman, violating privacy and making scenes. "Noah, let me ask you something. Do you think I'm losing my mind?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what," I said. "Do you think I'm confused, forgetful, unable to make rational decisions about my own life?" There was a long pause. "Mom, I think you've been under a lot of stress lately, living with Lauren, adjusting to changes, feeling like maybe you don't have as much independence as you used to have." It wasn't a direct answer, but it wasn't a dismissal either. For the first time in weeks, someone in my family was acknowledging that I might have legitimate reasons for feeling the way I did. "Your sister wants to have me declared legally incompetent," I said. "She's been consulting with lawyers and social workers about how to take away my right to make decisions about my own life." Another long pause. "Mom, are you sure about that? That seems pretty extreme." "I have copies of the emails if you'd like to see them." The silence stretched between us, and I could practically hear him processing this information, trying to reconcile the Lauren he knew with the Lauren I was, describing. "Can I come over?" he asked finally. "I think we need to talk about this in person." "I'd like that," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I meant it when I talked to one of my children. Maybe it wasn't too late for all of them. Maybe Noah could still be saved from the conspiracy that Lauren and Eric had built around my supposed incompetence. Maybe there was still one person in my family who could see me as I really was, instead of as the problem they needed to solve. I spent the time before he arrived organizing the evidence I'd gathered, the emails, the financial documentation, the timeline of their manipulation. If Noah was willing to listen, I was ready to tell him everything. And if he wasn't, at least I'd know where I stood with all of my children, instead of just 2 of them. Either way, the truth was finally coming out. Noah arrived at 3 o'clock, looking uncomfortable but determined. He'd always been the most thoughtful of my children, the one who considered all angles before making decisions. If anyone in my family was going to listen to reason, it would be him. I made coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table where I'd had so many conversations with his siblings, where I'd been dismissed and manipulated and made to feel crazy. But this time felt different. This time I wasn't defending myself. I was presenting evidence. "Mom, before we start, I want you to know that I love you and I'm concerned about you," Noah said, his hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "But I'm also confused about what's been happening. Lauren's version of events and your version seem completely different." "That's because we're living in different realities," I said. "In her reality, I'm a confused old woman who needs to be managed for her own good. In my reality, I'm a competent adult who's being manipulated and gaslighted by her own children." I pulled out the folder of printed emails and set it on the table between us. "I want you to read these, all of them. And then I want you to tell me which reality you think is more accurate." Noah opened the folder and began reading. I watched his face change as he worked through the pages, confusion giving way to surprise surprise giving way to concern, concern giving way to something that looked like horror. "Jesus, Mom," he said when he finished. "This is—" I had no idea she was doing any of this. She's been very careful to frame it as concern for my well-being, but look at what she's actually planning. Consulting with lawyers about guardianship, researching how to have me declared incompetent, building a case against my mental capacity. I leaned forward, my voice intense. "Noah, she wants to take away my legal rights. She wants to turn me into a child who needs her permission for everything." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the emails like they were written in a foreign language. But why? Why would she want to do this? It was the question I'd been asking myself for weeks, and I still didn't have a complete answer. "I think it started with guilt. I've given this family over $300,000 over the years, not to mention all the career sacrifices and personal compromises I made to support everyone's dreams and needs. Maybe it's easier to paint me as a confused old woman keeping score than to acknowledge the debt they owe me. But it's more than that now," I continued. "It's about control. Lauren has gotten used to making decisions for everyone in this family, and I'm the only one who started pushing back. She can't tolerate the idea that I might have opinions or preferences that don't align with her vision of what's best for me." Noah nodded slowly. "I've noticed that about her. She does like to be in charge of everything. And now she's trying to make that control legal and permanent. If she succeeds in having me declared incompetent, I'll lose the right to make decisions about my own medical care, my finances, where I live, who I see. I'll become her ward, completely dependent on her for everything. That's not going to happen," Noah said firmly. "I won't let it happen." The relief that flooded through me was so intense, I almost started crying. Finally, someone in my family was on my side. Finally, someone could see what Lauren was really doing. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't know how much it means to hear you say that. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have seen this sooner, should have paid more attention to what was happening." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I've been so focused on my own life that I didn't notice how Lauren was treating you. It's not your fault. She's been very subtle about it, very careful to make it look like love and concern." I squeezed his hand. "But now that you know, what do we do about it?" We spent the next hour making plans. Noah agreed to help me find an elder law attorney, someone who could advise me on how to protect myself from guardianship proceedings. He also offered to be my advocate with the rest of the family, to help counter Lauren's narrative about my supposed incompetence. "I think Eric needs to see these emails too," he said. "He's been going along with Lauren's concerns, but I don't think he realizes how far she's planning to take this." "And what about your father?" I asked. "Michael has been completely passive through all of this. He just sits in his chair and lets it happen." Noah's expression darkened. "Dad's always been conflict-averse, but this is different. This is his wife being attacked by his own daughter, and he's doing nothing to defend you. That's not okay." The front door opened, and we heard Lauren's voice calling out, "Mom? Noah? I saw your car outside." Noah and I exchanged glances. I quickly gathered up the emails and put them back in the folder, but it was too late. Lauren was already in the kitchen doorway, taking in the scene with sharp, calculating eyes. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice deceptively casual. "Just having coffee with Mom," Noah said. "We were catching up." "How nice." Lauren came into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, her movements casual but her posture tense. What were you catching up about? The question was directed at Noah, but her eyes were on me. She was trying to figure out what I'd told him, how much he knew, whether he was still an ally in her campaign against my competence. Family stuff. Noah said vaguely. How everyone's doing. What's been going on? I hope Mom didn't burden you with her concerns about us trying to help her, Lauren said, and there was a warning in her voice. She's been feeling a bit paranoid lately, imagining that normal family support is somehow threatening to her. Actually, Noah said, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. Mom showed me some very interesting emails. From your computer. Lauren went very still. What emails? The ones where you're researching how to have her declared incompetent. The ones where you're consulting with lawyers about guardianship procedures. The ones where you're building a case against her mental capacity. Noah's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. Those emails. For a moment, Lauren looked genuinely shocked, like she couldn't believe her carefully laid plans had been discovered. But then her expression shifted to something harder, more defensive. Those emails are private correspondence about legitimate concerns for Mom's well-being, she said. The fact that she violated my privacy to read them is exactly the kind of inappropriate behavior we're worried about. Inappropriate behavior? Noah stood up, his coffee forgotten. Lauren, you're trying to have our mother declared legally incompetent because she disagreed with Eric about a name. You're consulting with professionals about how to strip her of her legal rights. And you think her finding out about it is the inappropriate behavior here? She's not thinking clearly, Noah. She can't see that we're trying to help her. Lauren's voice was getting higher, more desperate. Look at how she's manipulating you right now, turning you against your own sister, with paranoid fantasies about some conspiracy. I've read the emails, Lauren. I've seen the documentation. This isn't a paranoid fantasy. It's a carefully planned campaign to control Mom's life. Noah moved to stand beside my chair, a physical show of support that meant everything to me. And it stops now. You don't understand the full situation, Lauren said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. There have been incidents, signs of cognitive decline that you haven't seen because you don't live here. What incidents? Noah demanded. Name one specific example of Mom doing something dangerous or irrational. Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it again. We all knew she couldn't answer that question because there was no answer. All of her evidence was subjective interpretation of normal behavior, twisted to fit her narrative of my incompetence. The fact that you're both ganging up on me right now proves my point, she said finally. Mom has manipulated you into taking her side against the family members who are actually trying to help her. This is exactly the kind of divisive behavior that shows she's not thinking clearly. It was masterful, really, the way she turned our alliance into evidence of my manipulation, the way she made our resistance to her control into proof that we were the ones with the problem. But Noah wasn't buying it. Lauren, I want you to listen to me very carefully, he said. Mom is not going to any more family meetings about her mental competence. She's not going to be evaluated by doctors you choose, or subjected to any more of your amateur psychological assessments. And if you try to pursue legal action against her, I will fight you every step of the way. You're making a mistake, Noah. When something happens, when she gets hurt or hurts someone else because we didn't intervene, you'll regret taking her side. Lauren's voice was cold now, all pretense of loving concern abandoned. Don't come crying to me when her poor judgment puts everyone at risk. She left without another word. and Noah and I sat in the sudden quiet of the kitchen. I felt drained but also oddly victorious. The battle lines were finally drawn, the pretenses finally dropped. Lauren was no longer pretending to act out of love, and I was no longer pretending to believe her. "Are you okay?" Noah asked. "I'm better than I've been in months," I said. And I meant it. For the first time since this started, I don't feel alone. "You're not alone, Mom. I'm with you, and we're going to figure this out together." He squeezed my shoulder. "But you should know, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Lauren doesn't like to lose, and she's not going to give up easily." I thought about the cold calculation in her eyes when she'd left, the threat implicit in her final words. He was right. This was far from over. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I had an ally in my own family. Someone who could see through Lauren's manipulation. Someone who was willing to stand with me against the people who claimed to love me while trying to destroy me. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to keep fighting. And fight I would, for as long as it took to remain myself. 3 months later, I was sitting in my own kitchen. My kitchen, in my own small apartment, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise through windows that I'd chosen, in a space that was entirely mine. The apartment was tiny, just a one-bedroom place across town, but it was perfect. Every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall, every book on the shelf was there, because I wanted it there. The transition hadn't been easy. Lauren had fought me every step of the way, threatening legal action, claiming I was making dangerous decisions, warning anyone who would listen that I was having some kind of breakdown. But Noah had stood by me, helping me find this place, helping me move my things, sitting with me through the lawyer meetings where we'd established my mental competence beyond any legal doubt. The elder law attorney, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been blunt about Lauren's chances of success. "Your daughter has no grounds for a competency hearing," she'd told us during our first meeting. "You're clearly mentally sound. You're managing your own affairs perfectly well, and there's no evidence of dangerous behavior or poor judgment. Any court would throw out a guardianship petition within minutes." But more than the legal protection, what had saved me was the truth finally coming out. When Noah showed Eric the emails, my oldest son had been horrified, not at Lauren's plan, but at being caught up in something he'd never fully understood. "I thought we were just worried about Mom's memory," he'd said, looking pale and shaken. "I didn't know Lauren was planning to take away her rights." The family meeting that followed had been brutal, but necessary. With Noah as my advocate and the evidence spread out on the table, Lauren's carefully constructed narrative had crumbled. Even Michael, passive as he was, couldn't ignore the documentation of his daughter's manipulation and conspiracy. "I never wanted this," he'd said quietly, staring at the emails. "I just wanted peace in the house. I didn't realize what was really happening." Lauren had tried to maintain her position, insisting that she'd been acting out of love and concern, that we were all making a mistake by not supporting her efforts to help me. But without Eric's backing, and with Noah actively opposing her, she'd found herself isolated, her authority challenged for the first time in years. The final break had come when she'd threatened to pursue legal action anyway, to have me evaluated by court-appointed psychiatrists who would see through my manipulation. That's when I'd made the decision to leave, to remove myself from the toxic environment she'd created and reclaim my independence. "You're abandoning your family," she'd said the day I moved out, standing in the driveway with tears in her eyes that might have been genuine. "After everything we've done for you, You're choosing to live alone like some bitter old woman who can't forgive her children for loving her." "I'm not abandoning anyone," I'd replied, loading the last box into Noah's truck. "I'm choosing to live somewhere I'm treated with respect, where my opinions matter, where I'm seen as a person instead of a problem to be managed." Now, 3 months later, I was happier than I'd been in years. I had my own space, my own schedule, my own decisions to make about everything from what to eat for breakfast to how to spend my afternoons. I'd reconnected with old friends, started volunteering at the local library, even begun planning a trip to Italy, the one I'd given up decades ago to bail out Eric's business. The relationships with my children had settled into a new normal. Noah visited regularly, and we'd grown closer than we'd ever been. He'd started bringing his girlfriend around, a lovely woman named Sarah, who treated me like a person worth knowing, rather than an elderly relative to be humored. Eric came by occasionally, usually with apologies and awkward attempts to rebuild our relationship. "I'm sorry, Mom," he'd said during his last visit. "I should have seen what Lauren was doing. I should have defended you." "You weren't the one manipulating me," I'd replied. "You were just going along with what seemed like reasonable concern. There's a difference." Michael visited too. Though our conversations were stilted and careful, the damage to our marriage might be irreparable. 40 years of partnership had been shattered by his willingness let our daughter attack me while he sat silently by. But we were working on it, slowly, with the help of a counselor who specialized in family dynamics. I was a coward, he'd admitted during one of our sessions. I knew what Lauren was doing was wrong. But I was afraid of the conflict, afraid of choosing sides. I let my fear hurt the person I love most. The hardest relationship to navigate was with Lauren herself. She still called occasionally, still insisted that she'd been acting out of love, still maintained that I was making a mistake by living independently. But the calls were less frequent now, and the manipulation was less subtle. Without the daily opportunity to undermine my confidence, her power over me had diminished dramatically. "I miss you, Mom," she'd said during our last conversation. "I miss having you here, being part of our daily lives. I miss the daughter who used to love me without trying to control me," I'd replied. "But I don't miss being made to feel crazy in my own home." The most unexpected joy had come from my relationship with Sophie. Without Lauren's constant supervision, my granddaughter and I had been able to spend time together without the undercurrent of tension that had poisoned our interactions. She came over most weekends helping me cook and talking about school and boys and her plans for the future. "I'm glad you moved out, Grandma," she'd said one afternoon while we were making cookies. "You seem happier now, more like yourself." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Before, you always seemed like you were walking on eggshells. Like you were afraid of saying the wrong thing. Now you just seem like Grandma again." Out of the mouths of babes, a 13-year-old had seen what the adults in my family had missed or chosen to ignore. That I'd been diminished by their treatment, made smaller and more careful, and less myself. This morning, as I sat in my sunny kitchen planning my day, I thought about the letter I'd written to my mother all those months ago. I'd never sent it, of course, but I'd kept it as a reminder of how low I'd been brought, how close I'd come to losing myself entirely. The woman who'd written that letter, broken, defeated, doubting her own sanity, felt like a stranger to me now. I was still Helen Carter, still a mother and grandmother and wife. But I was also Helen again, the person I had been before I'd learned to make myself small enough to fit into other people's expectations. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Claire, calling to confirm our lunch plans. "How are you feeling about today?" she asked. "Nervous at all?" Today was the day I was finally taking that trip to Italy, the one I'd dreamed about for decades. Not the elaborate month-long adventure I'd originally planned, but a wonderful week-long tour with a group of other women my age. I'd booked it, using money from my own savings account, money that was mine to spend on my own dreams for the first time in years. "I'm excited," I said, and I meant it. "I can't believe I'm actually doing this." "I can. You're the bravest person I know, Helen. You fought for your right to remain yourself, and you won." After we hung up, I finished my coffee and went to pack the last few items in my suitcase. On my dresser was a new photo, one Noah had taken, of me at my apartment warming party, surrounded by friends and family members who'd chosen to support my independence rather than question it. In the photo, I'm laughing at something Sophie said, my head thrown back and my eyes bright with genuine joy. I look like myself again. Not the careful, diminished version I'd become, but the real Helen, the one who'd been hidden under years of other people's expectations and demands. Lauren wasn't in the photo. She'd been invited but had chosen not to come, claiming she couldn't support my reckless decision to live alone. Her absence had been noted by everyone present and not in a way that reflected poorly on me. As I zipped up my suitcase, I thought about forgiveness. People kept asking me if I'd forgiven Lauren, if I was ready to put the past behind us and rebuild our relationship. The truth was more complicated than they wanted to hear. I'd forgiven the daughter who'd been overwhelmed by guilt and fear, who genuinely believed she was protecting me even as she was destroying me. But I couldn't forget the woman who'd systematically tried to gaslight me into doubting my own sanity, who'd consulted with lawyers about stripping away my legal rights, who'd been willing to sacrifice my autonomy for her own peace of mind. Maybe someday we'd find our way back to each other. Maybe she'd do the work necessary to understand what she'd done and why it was wrong. Maybe she'd learn to love me without trying to control me, to respect me as an adult, even when she disagreed with my choices. But I wasn't holding my breath, and more importantly, I wasn't waiting for her approval or forgiveness or understanding to live my life. I'd learned the hard way that you can't make people love you the way you deserve to be loved, but you can refuse to accept less than your worth. The taxi arrived at noon to take me to the airport. As we pulled away from my apartment building, I looked back at the windows of my little home and felt a surge of pride. I'd built this life for myself, claimed this independence, fought for this freedom. No one had given it to me. I'd taken it. At 62, I was finally learning who I was when I wasn't trying to be what everyone else needed me to be. It had taken a family crisis and the near loss of my autonomy to teach me that lesson. But I'd learned it well. I was Helen Carter, not just Mom or Grandma or Mrs. Carter, but Helen. A woman with her own dreams and opinions and plans for the future. A woman who was finally, truly free to be herself. And for the first time in decades, that felt like enough. If you're watching this story and recognizing yourself in it, please know that you're not alone. Elder abuse takes many forms, and emotional manipulation is just as damaging as physical abuse. You have the right to be treated with respect and dignity at any age. You have the right to make your own decisions about your life, your medical care, and your future. And you have the right to walk away from people who claim to love you while trying to control you. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. And remember, it's never too late to reclaim your life.